Turkey has pledged 10,000 tons of aid for Rohingya Muslims fleeing the violence in Rakhine State. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says his country has already started delivering aid to camps for the displaced.
The second stage is 10,000 tons. Aid such as food, medicine and clothes will be distributed. With all of these, there is the UN General Assembly ahead of us. We will be there on the 17th of September. The UN General Assembly starts on the 19th, and this will be an important topic on the agenda in our talks and my speeches there.
Well, let's speak to Gulnur Aybet, who is the senior advisor to the Turkish president, and she joins me now. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. Can you tell me more about this phone call between President Erdogan and Aung San Suu Kyi? Because President Erdogan has been very vocal about the problems facing the Rohingya minority. What does he want Aung San Suu Kyi to do?
Yes, well, when the president spoke to Aung San Suu Kyi, he did indicate that Turkey has an understanding and is appreciative of the difficulties the civilian government faces in this situation. But the urgency for Turkey is the current humanitarian catastrophe that's evolving from these events. And Turkey has already made it clear, and this was also featured in the phone call to Aung San Suu Kyi, that Turkey condemns any terrorist attacks against the Myanmar security forces. But at the same time, the absolute level of this humanitarian catastrophe is something that requires urgent action, and that's why I think that the immediate concern that Turkey has is to have some immediate action for humanitarian relief and bring an end to the suffering as soon as possible. On the other hand, Turkey is very interested, of course, to find a lasting solution so that these incidents do not keep recurring.
Yeah, can I ask you about the Turkish government's reaction to Aung San Suu Kyi's words that the situation has been misrepresented, there is misinformation about the situation, there is a problem of terrorism in Rakhine State? Does that go any way towards explaining the level of violence that we're seeing in Rakhine State against the Rohingya?
I mean, Turkey has repeatedly said that the excessive use of force is something that cannot be accepted and has to be halted as soon as possible. And this was also featured in the president's phone call to Aung San Suu Kyi. We're very concerned about the excessive use of force. So the remarks made by Aung San Suu Kyi, I suppose, this is my reading of it, is something to do with the difficulties she does face in trying to balance the limited remit that the civilian government has and the still stronghold of the military. But the lasting solution, which has been worked out actually in a report put together by the former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, is something positive. And Turkey has said that it's willing to support the implementation of the proposals in this report for a lasting peace. So Turkey is actually looking at it very, very positively, and understanding the difficulties faced by the Myanmar government, but at the same time being the champion of an urgent intervention with regards to the humanitarian catastrophe. This is precisely why President Erdogan, in the first few days as the catastrophe was unfolding, went around an intensive diplomatic effort calling all the Muslim leaders and then speaking to Aung San Suu Kyi, and also he will be bringing it to the attention at the UN General Assembly. So he's working, and the Turkish government as well as the president are working on multilateral fronts to find a solution to this. But with regards to the humanitarian catastrophe,
well, let me ask you about the UN General Assembly meeting, which is due to take place on September the 19th.
The first foreign aid agency
what is President Erdogan going to be asking the General Assembly to do?
President Erdogan at the General Assembly will want to bring this, the seriousness of the humanitarian catastrophe to the attention of the international community and urge for urgency in action to bring an end to the humanitarian disaster. Already Turkey is doing all it can as a single country within this level. As I mentioned, we are the first foreign aid agency bringing in a considerable amount of aid, and the foreign minister is right now in Bangladesh trying to resolve the situation of the refugees there, and as well as the hundreds and thousands of refugees on the Bangladeshi border. So Turkey is actually putting a hands-on approach to solving the humanitarian crisis, but also in the more medium term trying to look for a lasting solution. But there's so much one country can do on its own. So the appropriate place to bring this to the international community's attention and to rally enough support to follow Turkey's lead in solving this crisis, with the obvious place is the UN General Assembly, and that's precisely what the President plans to do in his address to the UN General Assembly.